Hello everyone, Goldrook here. Today I will be talking about some of my games playing Doomsday in a Legacy League. Before we get into the matches, I just want to take a look at the deck list and talk about some of my card choices here. Right now I'm on a Grixis build using 16 lands and a full set of petals. For the most part it looks pretty standard. So let me talk about some of the deviations I have here. I think of note is the two predicts that I have in this list. I like this card because it's fairly good in the neutral game, or like the developmental phases of the game, if you will. And it's a very good card to have in your piles. I think some of the other pilots are using Ideas Inbound, and as powerful as it is, I just prefer to minimize the cards that aren't useful in like the developmental stages of the game. And this also applies for cards like the Cyclers, Street Wraith, and Edge of Autumn. Right now, I'm only playing 2 of them. I know some of the other pilots are using Personal Tutor these days, and in that slot I have Limdol's Vault. I think these play fairly well with the predicts, but I still have to see how I really feel about them. I might go up to like a 3rd predict or play some more Cyclers, but we will have to see. Moving on to the sideboard, I have Second Thassa's Oracle to help against the Stifle decks that have become fairly popular. Flusterstorm, Surgical Extraction, Tormod's Crypt are all for decks like Storm or Reanimator. This one Massacre is for any Thalia decks. Pyroblast is for big blue decks, and Abrade is for the Prison strategy. Alright, and let's go ahead and check out the matches we have this time. Alright, here we are in round 1. First hand doesn't look very good, so I ship that away. Second hand doesn't do much either, so we go down to 5. Here I see a potential for turn 2 Doomsday with the day's backup, so I go ahead and bottom the Predict and the Scalding Tarn. And it turns out our opponent is on Rug Delver. Nothing too useful with our first draw. Right now our opponent has quite a bit of power on board. So if this Doomsday were to resolve, I would go down to 8 life, which would mean that a Lightning Bolt kills us. The sort of pile I'm looking for from this point on is one that utilizes the Brainstorm I have in hand. In this case, I'm able to set up potentially one that leads with Duress to check for Stifle, and probably go into a pile ending with about a card left in my library. Either which way, I'm losing to Lightning Bolt anyway, so I figured this was the best I could do. Doomsday runs into a Daze, which runs into my own Daze. And as I planned, I go into a pile from top to bottom: Duress, Lion's Eye Diamond, Preordain, Street Wraith, Thassa's Oracle. The middle 3 cards might have varied in order. Those 3 cards were just supposed to be drawn by Doomsday, but our opponent never gives us a chance and uses Lightning Bolt for the finish. Moving on to game 2, let's take a look at the sideboard here. Looks like I cut 1 Predict, 1 Thoughtseize, 2 Limdol's Vault. I likely bring in 3 Baleful Strix and the second Thassa's Oracle. That's generally what I do for this matchup. Open with a fairly steady hand. I have access to both of my basics, which is always a good thing. At this point, I'm just looking for more black sources and Doomsday itself. Not having a turn 1 threat is always good for us. I go ahead and just continue to dig deeper. I did not want... you might have saw the quick flash of the Ponder, but it was Daze, Force of Will, Underground Sea. The Underground Sea was a card that I did want, but I didn't think I wanted more counter magic, so I go ahead and shuffle, and luckily draw into Doomsday. Double fetch indicates a threat of some kind, and I Daze here. I'm pretty happy about this Daze. Being able to set back the tempo player and eliminate their clock is always a good thing. And I take this opportunity to Thoughtseize my opponent when they're tapped out so that they can't hide anything with Brainstorm. And I see Force of Negation, Ponder, Return to Nature, Stifle, and 2 Wastelands. So at this point, I'm thinking that all I need to do is resolve Doomsday, and then I could probably put some cards in the pile to help me interact with this Stifle here. So I go ahead and take the Force of Negation. Also, one thing to note, our opponent didn't have a clock, which is always a nice thing for this matchup. This Ponder was likely spent to find and or set up for this Insectile Aberration. And here we find our 3rd black source, and we could also play around Daze, so I go ahead and run Doomsday out. I will also be going to 8 life here, so the idea was to play Baleful Strix and kind of hold him off for a little while. It does get eaten by the Return to Nature, but it forces the opponent to use mana, which was something that I'm definitely looking for. So it looks like I had Oracle, or Edge of Autumn, Oracle, Cavern of Souls, Baleful Strix. In hindsight, that the bottom card probably should have been in Duress, since I didn't really have any opportunities to play the 2nd Oracle, but I'll get into it once we get to that point in the game. I Brainstorm at the end of turn just so I could get a card deeper. And here I have the option of playing around Daze by laying the Cavern of Souls, but I think the Cavern is too valuable, so I hold on to it. Sure enough, the Strix is eaten by a Return to Nature. Alright, like I said, had this bottom card been a Duress, I would have been able to check their hand for Stifle or Counter Magic, just to make this pile that much safer. But luckily for me, all I need to do is counter the Stifle. And I'm guessing my opponent had, I think, the Insectile Aberration flipped off of a Force of Will, so they must have had just another non-blue card. So I was fairly fortunate there. Definitely could have played more carefully, but I guess I got away with that one. On to the 3rd game here. Keep a 1-lander. I mean, aside from that, everything looks pretty solid. I've got a cantrip that could probably help me dig a little deeper. The 2 Baleful Strix buys me a bunch of time, and I have the namesake card, Doomsday. So in general, it looks pretty good. But definitely need that 2nd land to get started. For some reason, I just passed turn here. I think I respect Stifle a little too much. In hindsight, I probably should have just like cycled the Street Wraith, or just get a little more information before just giving up this turn. Our opponent might have played around Daze here, but chooses to deploy the Delver's Secrets on the 2nd turn, and here I just completely miss. Definitely not a good look. Yeah, had I preordained the 1st turn, I would have been able to. I probably would have been in position to fire off the 2nd preordain. For some reason, I keep that Dark Ritual thinking that I could use it for the Doomsday, and right now I just prioritize setting up my defenses, but at this point we're fairly far behind, so definitely an uphill battle. So it looks like the wheels definitely fall off from this point. Definitely should have thought harder about firing off that turn 1 preordain. You know, at this point it's just a Hail Mary. I did have the option to there was a window where if my opponent were to tap out, I could use days to kind of like ritual my way into a second source so that I could use predict to get into this Doomsday pile. But we don't get such an opportunity here. I think me flusterstorming here is just honestly for show. I'm quite dead at this point. So yeah, definitely some mistakes made in the early stages of this game, but it's kind of why I'm doing this. I just want to see what I'm doing wrong. So yeah, definitely something to learn from this match. Alright, we have round 2 here. The first hand was a quick mulligan. I think it was a no-lander, so not much to talk about there, but this second hand looks much better. I decide to bottom the Edge of Autumn. This hand is a nice little demonstration of why I like Predict so much. The Ponder sets it up quite nicely. Of course, it doesn't set it up if you have to shuffle, but either which way, we found our third black source to cast Doomsday, so it's not the worst. Alright, Underground Sea Ponder. Unlikely to be a Delver or Tempo variant of some kind, so I just decide to try to get to my win condition before our opponent does, just assuming that they're on some sort of Dark Ritual deck themselves. It wasn't met with much resistance, so I just try to set up a pile using this Predict. I've selected Cavern of Souls, Island, Lotus Petal, Street Wraith, Thassa's Oracle. So the plan was to draw into the Thassa's Oracle, Predict into Lotus Petal and Cavern of Souls, and using Street Wraith as a way to get down to my last card. So as for the card to put to set up for Predict, I always like to choose a card that might come in handy if something goes awry. In this case, I was playing around something like Wasteland. You know, if they were to Wasteland the Underground Sea, then I would be able to just draw into the island, use the Predict, and name Street Wraith, which would get me into Lotus Petal Cavern of Souls. I think that would be a situation where, like, I don't think I would name, like, if I were to do that, I wouldn't have the land drops to be able to win on the same turn. But I mean, I figured this covered quite a bit of ground, in addition to us having a Force of Will. So yeah. Our opponent puts a Ponder on the stack. And as suspected, it is some sort of storm deck. They put a Cabal Ritual on the stack, and here I just want to go ahead and Force of Will. I don't want to give them any more black mana. They've already played their land. I think if they go like Land Petal, Infernal Tutor, that would be pretty bad, but just judging off of how they're sequencing this, I just wanted to. I figured that they probably have some sort of discard spell, so I just want to cut them off of black mana right here. So as planned, I go ahead and name island with predict. And the replay glitches out here, but I go ahead and cycle to my last card, which is the Lotus Petal, play my land, and finish out game 1. Alright, for game 2, let's start by looking at the sideboard here. Looks like I cut a predict, 1 preordain, 2 Limdol's Vaults. I imagine I side in looks like I side in 2 Surgical Extractions, 1 Tormod's Crypt, and 2 Flusterstorms. Oh, I also cut the Cavern of Souls. That's the 5th card. Alright, yeah. So out for take out 5 cards, add in 5 cards. Start with a fairly steady hand. Of course, it'd be a little better on the play, but I figured the Surgical Extraction and the Street Wraith might be enough to help us survive through the first turn and help give this day some value, essentially. Alright, opening with a Volcanic Island against having a Storm player open with a Volcanic Island is usually a good thing to see. I'd rather not see Underground Sea. Alright, drawing a second land is great here. Go ahead and fire off a Ponder. Here I go ahead and put Forcible second from top. If for whatever reason they try to, duress and go off on the same turn, I can cycle Street Wraith into the Forcible and just kind of surprise them with that. There's no reason to, I think, draw at this turn, especially with the Street Wraith here. Alright, speaking of discard spells, your opponent goes ahead and puts a duress on the stack. And I think here I do want to duress. I just want to, in this case it's less so about our opponent taking card. I just want to prevent them from seeing any information. Does set me back a land, but I think it's a worthy trade-off here. Days only gets worse from here on out. I go ahead and fetch here just to get rid of that card we know from Ponder. And put another Ponder on the stack, seeing these 3 cards, Flusterstorm, Delta, Predict. I do want the Flusterstorm and the Predict. I do not want this Delta. Luckily for us, I do have that Predict to send it away. I go ahead and put the I go ahead and keep the Flusterstorm on top. Just in case our opponent has more discard spells. I believe they spend another turn sculpting their hand. No need to take action here. So far, so good. And this is a good opportunity to predict on their end phase. At this point, I rather just I found Edge of Autumn, so I go ahead and burn the Street Wraith to get me deeper into the deck. I figured Edge of Autumn at this point it serves as my cycler in, and this I wanted to hold the Preordain to be able to pitch to Force of Will, which is why I go ahead and cycle the Street Wraith first. And luckily for me, I find Doomsday. I don't think I'm able to safely go off at this point. I'd rather not tap out and put myself at risk. If I could hold out another turn, I am able to actually set up a nice brainstorm pile, no thanks to the Edge of Autumn. So I just play my 3rd land and pass turn here. And go ahead and discard Oracle. I don't think I need that. Okay. Opponent starts going for it, leaving up the Bayou to kind of present Veil of Summer. At this point, I don't think there's any reason to take action. If they have a discard spell, they would have likely fired it off already, especially with this much mana available. So I go ahead and let the 2nd Writ resolve. And this, the 3rd spell, rather the 4th spell of the turn, this No, at this point there's plenty. This would be the 6th, I think. Brainstorm, 2 Dark Rituals, the 2 Gems, and this Cabal Ritual would make Storm of 6. Um, at this point, my opponent only has 2 cards, and the Surgical Extraction here is starting to look real good. I think if they're going for a Past in Flames line, taking away the Dark Rituals would be a fairly good play. And doing so here also gets our opponent off the threshold. So I go ahead and Surgical Extraction to kind of elicit a response from our opponent, basically. I do use mana. There's no reason to pay life here. And sure enough, the green mana was for a Veil of Summer. I believe this makes Storm of 8, which makes this Flusterstorm have 9 copies. Right now our opponent has, let's see, 3 diamond. Between the floating mana and the gems, they have, let's see, 7 mana. So what I end up doing is I put, I think, 8 copies of Flusterstorm and Veil of Summer, and 1 copy on Cabal Ritual. I just want to make sure that this Veil of Summer does not resolve, especially since our opponent has 1 card and I still have Force of Will left. So, yeah. So, 8 copies on Flusterstorm and the last one on Cabal Ritual. They're unable to pay it. I think a strange thing happens here. I don't know if my opponent is aware that one of the Flusterstorm copies is targeting the Cabal Ritual, and I think they let it go. So, minor victory there. A little strange because it was done through Moto, but yeah, I don't know if that was something that my opponent wanted. And finally, the Surgical resolves. I take all the Cabal Rituals and see just 1 Infernal Tutor left in their hand. If they commit to it, great. If not, I mean, either which way, I think I've found a way to conclude this game. I have just enough cards to set up a Brainstorm pile here. The gist of the pile is from top to bottom: Brainstorm, Lion's Eye Diamond, Street Wraith, Preordain, Thassa's Oracle. Such a pile ends up with 1 card in library, and I mean, our opponent has no interaction, so I think it's a fine play. Alright, and that is it for round 2. Alright, moving on to round 3 here. Open with a fairly steady hand. I think as long as I find Doomsday here, it looks pretty good. So I go ahead and keep. Alright, Island Preordain usually indicates some kind of 2-color deck. So it could be Sneak and Show, Blue-Red Delver, some kind of combo deck. So nice and ambiguous opening here. Go ahead and fetch for an island. At this point, I have 2 Dark Rituals, so there's no need to, you know, expose like my blue source to a wasteland. Here I see Daze, Force of Will, Preordain. I think I keep this Ponder under the suspicion that my opponent might be on Sneak and Show. I think I go ahead and stack from bottom to top Preordain, Force of Will, Daze. Yes. Ship the turn. Alright, there's the Volcanic Island, but they're tapping it and putting a young Pyromancer on the stack. So here, just go ahead and Daze. I'd rather not. Like, my hand is a little slow, so I just want to keep the opponent off of their threat to buy me some time. I know the card coming up, so I go ahead and hold on to this Preordain, and our opponent puts a threat on the table, Sprite Dragon. I think this is okay. for the time being. Right now, I put a Cavern of Souls as my land. I do want to play around days here, but I also don't want to expose my only black source that I have access to right now. So, I mean, eventually when I get into the pile, this cavern will come in handy. But yeah, like if they have a wasteland, the wasteland's probably going to be hitting this cavern first. So that's kind of why I do that here. I bottom both of what I see with that preordain and draw Volcanic Island. Still no sign of Doomsday yet. And our opponent continues to chip away at my life. Deploys more threats, interacts with my mana base. Bottom both cards, and find an Edge of Autumn. Still no sign. This Sprite Dragon has quickly gotten out of hand. And this brainstorm is somewhat of a Hail Mary brainstorm. But we do find the Doomsday. I think here I bottom the Lion's Eye Diamond and the Street Wraith. I don't want to lose any more life than I already have. Put a Dark Ritual on the stack and check in with Thoughtseize. Seeing Daze, Force of Negation, Force of Will, Force of Will. Now, with this current setup, I could just Dark Ritual again, cast Doomsday, and cycle Edge of Autumn and get into a Predict pile. However, I totally brain fart and I take his Force of Negation instead of the Daze. I should have just realized that had I just taken one card, they would have been left with but one bit of counter magic, and I did have the Force of Will to counter theirs. So, unfortunate misplay here, but again, I'm glad I'm running through these games because it's the only way I could learn from my mistakes here. Yeah, so Force of Will here, and I just go ahead and concede. Alright, on to game 2. Again, let's start with the sideboard. Blue-Red Delver tends not to have any stifles, at least in my experience, so I keep the second Oracle in the board. I board out 1 Daze, 1 Predict, 2 Thoughtseize, 2 Limdol's Faults, and it looks like I bring in the 3 Pyroblasts and the 3 Baleful Strix. Alright, I'm on the play with Daze and Baleful Strix in hand, a definite keeper. Okay, definitely don't want those lands. Ship it away. Starting with a turn 1 Preordain. It's always a good sign if they don't start off with a Delver. It was very possible that I should have played Delta here. You know, as we'll see, my opponent is very trigger happy with his wastelands. But as it stands, I'm somewhat ahead. Alright, I go ahead and put a Brainstorm on the stack without showing him my land. And it turns out my opponent chooses to Daze here. I'm not too sure if I should have played the land first, but either which way, from here I have 2 options. I could either pay with my pedal or Daze back. And I think for here, having like the tempo advantage against the tempo deck isn't the worst thing. And so I felt like it was alright to pay for this Daze using the Lotus Petal. Go ahead and put back the second Lotus Petal and the Lion's Eye Diamond. And fetch out yet another Underground Sea. So I'm up 2 lands, and I've got 2 Dazes in my hand. It's a fairly good position to be in. Here I go ahead and trade. There's no reason, I didn't see a reason to hold back. And that's the second Wasteland of the game. downing another C. I top deck a Baleful Strix, and back to square one. And yeah, that's the third Underground Sea. I really wish I had fetched out a Swamp. I'm not sure how that would have affected my plays, but I mean, at least it makes my days somewhat more effective. Still not the best situation. There's no reason not to attack here. I finally find a Doomsday. All that's left to be found is the triple black, essentially. Felt like dazing here was a fairly safe play. Just want to keep that one up on the board. Don't want those. I choose not to attack here. I have seen Sprite Dragon, and that's something that we don't want to run into, so go ahead and hold back here. And I'm under the impression here that my opponent is digging for something, so I go ahead and daze. But they did have the land. Alright, still looking for that triple black any day now. Felt like I was in a fairly good position, and things are just slowly getting out of hand. Just go ahead and brainstorm here and finally find a black source. Still has we still have a bunch of clutter, but I'm able to put a Thoughtseize on the stack, seeing Force of Negation, Preordain, Sprite Dragon. Here my rationale was to take the Preordain. I really didn't want my opponent to be chaining cantrips and amassing an army of elementals. In hindsight, that was probably wrong. Just looking at my hand, the plan was to cast the Predict, which would put me at basically one counterspell. So if my opponent somehow finds a second one, I would be in trouble. And I think I should have also considered the fact that he had 3 lands. Because of that, any blue spell off the top would, like a Force of Will off the top, would mean that I would be losing any sort of counter wars I'd be getting into. So yeah, this is kind of a bad habit of mine. I tend to just like I guess it's not a bad habit. I just need to be better about I just need to be better about my discard spells. So I do take the Preordain, unfortunately. Of course, hindsight's always 20/20, but I still think taking the Force of Negation was a better play. I mean, you'd think that I'd be in a decent position. My opponent has 2 cards, and all I need to do is find, that black source. And I'm still digging away. I do know what's on top, and unfortunately, I just draw a land, but it is not a land that I want. My opponent flips a Force of Will off of the Delver Secrets, and I think that's like the beginning of the end, basically. I've missed a bunch of black sources, and yeah, it's just things aren't looking too good. I probably should have played a land after I brainstormed. This Scalding Tarn has no fetch. It can't fetch black sources. I'm all out of Underground Seas. No thanks to the 3 wastelands I saw earlier in this game. So really, like, I think I'm just out of this game. It really doesn't look good at this point. Yeah, do I Force of Will? I don't think I can. Like, it draws away the Force of Negation, but again, maybe I should have taken that. Had I taken that, we could be in a very different situation here. So yeah, this Strix could have bought me some time, but I think from here it's pretty safe to say, like, unless if I draw like Brainstorm or Dark Ritual or something, yeah, I basically have to draw Brainstorm here into a Dark Ritual and a second brainstorm. It's very, very specific, but yeah. I guess this game is pretty over. He just attacks for another 4, and yeah, I draw a Pyroblast, and that's it. Yeah, an unfortunate round 3, but a lot to learn from this one. All right, we have round 4 here. Open with a pretty solid hand on the play. Okay, don't want any of those. It was just land, Dark Ritual, Thassa's Oracle. Alright, so our opponent leads with a Delver. It's an easy daze, I think, here. I'm always happy to keep our opponent, our Delver opponent off of their threats. Just play around daze here just in case, and Thoughtseize. I see Brainstorm, Force, and 4 other lands, so it's a good look for me. You know, I go ahead and take the Brainstorm. I think it's correct here to take the cantrip, especially since I have the second Thoughtseize. And of course, our opponent top decks a Brainstorm, fixes up their hand a little bit. So I do find the Doomsday. And at this point, if I top deck a black source, like a land or something, then I could probably fire off this Doomsday. So I go ahead and cast Thoughtseize here and take the Force of Will, leaving them with Ponder, and I believe they had a Wasteland in their hand. So that either which way, I was going to have to find a Dark Ritual if I wanted to go off the next turn. A little unfortunate there, but still in this. Bottom both of these, find a black source. Alright, still looking for the third. Big Scary Uro. Don't have a lot of experience playing against this card, but as I am to find out, it's a very tough one to play against. Alright. A strange decision for me here. I don't know why I choose to preordain. I think had I just played a land and jammed Doomsday, it might have been okay. You know, had it resolved, I would have probably put a daze on top, cantripped into the daze and tried to prevent the Uro. But you know, I for whatever reason just feel like looking for a Dark Ritual or protection spell or something. And you know, I've got a decent setup here. I can play around days, and I have Force of Will back up. Opponent goes ahead and escapes Uro, and I make the worst decision possible. I go ahead and Brainstorm here. I don't know what I'm looking for. I think I'm just like hoping for a daze or something. And I just see 3 lands. Definitely not a good look. So I think from here it's pretty safe to say that it's the game's probably over. Alright, put that Doomsday on the sack, and opponent dazes. Can't be a good sign if they're dazing so willingly. I don't see 1 daze, but 2. And he actually has a 3rd, and I just go ahead and concede. Alright, game 2, a quick look at the sideboard. I guess, contrary to what I've said, I choose not to board in the second Thassa's Oracle for this game. I do cut 1 daze, 1 predict, 2 Thoughtseize, 2 Limdrill's Vault. So yeah, it looks like same thing. I board in 3 Strix and 3 Pyroblast. So, and I open with a Strix and Doomsday. Pretty solid hands. Don't want any of those. Turn 1 Delver. Alright, I decide to put a Strix on the stack and play around days. Opponent flips off a Force of Will. Now, knowing that they have the Force of Will, I'm not sure if protecting the Strix here was right or not. I think I play a little more conservatively and choose to protect my life total. But just like looking at this situation now, I'm really starting to wonder. You know, was this really the correct decision? Continue to draw lands, and I brainstormed to a fairly good 3. I would be able to cast Dark Ritual Doomsday with a Force of Will backup, so I just decide and go for it. They force, and I force back. They go ahead and let that resolve. Let's see here. What do I do? Here I set up a predict pile with a couple ways to interact with Stifle. I have selected Cavern of Souls, Duress, Flusterstorm, Predict, Thassa's Oracle. So for whatever reason the Predict gets countered, I do have like a Flusterstorm to protect my board state a little bit. Go ahead and block. There's no reason not to at this point. We're entering the end phases of the game. Alright, opponent just goes Tarmogoyf. So I predict now. At this point, I am pretty safe against Wasteland. Even if they do draw Wasteland, I do have a Cavern of Souls on top, and it still allows me to cast Duress into Oracle. We go Uro. At this point, I'm pretty happy since their cantrip costed them 3 mana. They did find the Wasteland, but yeah, with whatever cards they have left, I do have the resources to play around it. So I go ahead and Duress, take a Force of Will, and that's that for game 2. Alright, third and final round. Third and final game, I guess. I keep a really sketchy hand. It's by no means good. I definitely keep it for science, not for the win. Yeah, the idea was just to lay Cavern of Souls and name Bird, and hope that was enough to buy time to cast Doomsday. I'd had both cyclers. If for whatever reason the opponent decides to wasteland the Cavern of Souls, I do have the Edge of Autumn to like sacrifice it in response and draw a card. Not the best thing to do, but you know, I decided to keep this hand anyway. Alright, no land. We do have this Baleful Strix. They flip a Force of Negation, start cantripping. Yeah, that's no good. So I cycle a Street Wraith and find a Polluted Delta. I decide to fetch for basic island here. I really don't like that. In hindsight, I should have probably just gotten Underground Sea. You know, already, like, my land, the one land that I have is Cavern of Souls. It's not going to help me get the mana I need to cast Doomsday. And if I'm already on, like, like, if I'm using Edge of Autumn to, like, play around Wasteland, I may as well have just gotten Underground Sea. See a bunch of junk, shuffle it away. I decided to fight over this Brainstorm. I just kind of got the feeling that my opponent was behind, and like I had this daze. I figured I'd just see what would happen, and the fact that they, you know, casted Forcible to get this Brainstorm through was a pretty good sign. You know, okay, so I didn't want to fight over that Brainstorm, but I guess I did want to fight over this Lightning Bolt. I just, you know, really wanted to buy myself a lot of time. And with them on 3 cards, it's a fairly good look. But yeah, this Preordained Seas, Underground Seas, Scalding Tarn. Again, had this island been a black source, we would have been in really good shape. We're getting to a point where this Edge of Autumn can just sacrifice, like I could just probably sacrifice the Cavern of Souls, so that if Doomsday were to resolve, I could just put it back in the pile. But right now there's a big old Tarmogoyf in my face, and now a Sylvan Library. Things aren't looking too hot. Yeah. had a chance here, but things kind of went out of hand, and opponent came out on top. So that's a 0 for 3 against Delver this time around. Made a couple mistakes, but yeah, hopefully I could navigate some of my Delver games a little better in the future. All right, moving on to the last round. I'm paired with an old friend. Leads Underground Sea. There's no better way to greet your old friend with a stifle on your first fetch land. So I've seen 2 Underground Seas and Stifle, but no threat. So not a bad way to be. Ponder and see that polluted delta, which I'm definitely interested in. You know, I don't want to be going around fetching my only delta just to get it stifled. Still no threat from my opponent, which gives me plenty of time to continue sculpting. I do want both of these Force of Wills. Kind of gives me a chance to progress my game plan a little bit, and definitely anticipated the Stifle. I'm going to go ahead and stifle that. And while that the fetch line is still on the sack, I decided to fetch with my Street Wraith just so I could get into the second Force of Will. And sure enough, my opponent has yet another response. I force a will, and he forces back. So at this point, we're on the bare minimum. So I go ahead and fetch with this delta. Just I find a swamp. I really want to play around Wasteland at this point. You know, after seeing Stifle and Shadow Doubt, there's a high chance that I would be seeing Wasteland here, and it's crazy. Shadow Doubt draws them a card, so they're up to 3. Let's see. I duress, or rather, I thought seize, taking a Snapcaster Mage and leaving a Brainstorm and a Daze. So still primed to resolve this Doomsday and get my plan going, but they do have a Brainstorm and 2 cards left. Figured now is a good time, and unfortunately he had a Shadow of Doubt, and Doomsday does say search, and so this means that I'd be left with no cards in my library, or I guess I get to search through my graveyard, but I did not have a Thassa's Oracle there, so I go ahead and concede this game. Alright, going to game 2, looking at the sideboard again. I've decided to cut 4 Dazes, 2 Limdul's Vault. I really didn't want a counterspell that would set me back time, especially against a deck with like a bunch of land hate. So yeah, I just trade the Dazes for Pyroblasts and the 2 Flusterstorms. What's the last card that I bring in? It's not really coming to mind right now. But yeah, maybe it'll come to me once the game gets rolling. Shipboy a no lander, and I see plenty of lands and a duress. I do like this hand. I see a bunch of cantrips, and while it's not, you know, business per se, I decide to keep it because so far I hadn't seen any threats, so I figured it was okay to play a nice, slow, deliberate game. These cantrips definitely give me more options. Definitely don't want to fire off this duress yet. I think this duress is valuable in that I want to be checking for like stifles on a critical turn, or you know, just definitely, yeah. There's no reason to fire that off too soon. And I actually draw this Thassa's Oracle, which oh, that's the last card actually. I bring in the second Oracle. Yeah, I like to do this against decks that play Stifle. So Having this Thassa's Oracle in hand is really handy because if I do find a way to just Doomsday and it is Shadow of Doubted, then I would still be left with the Thassa's Oracle in hand and ready to be deployed once I've been given a chance. So not too unhappy about that draw. Alright, a very timely Wasteland to keep me off of 3 black. Decides to waste me on upkeep. And of course, just in time I find the Doomsday. I go ahead and duress here. I do so because if I manage to find a 3rd black source on the subsequent turn, then I'd be in a prime position to just set up a pile and just hope that this Thassa's Oracle gets into play. Since I will be searching for my graveyard, having this duress in the yard means that I can also just stack it back into the deck and take any potential stifles that would bother me. Right now I see Brainstorm, Daze, Shadow of Doubt, Sinkhole, Stifle, Swamp, Underground Sea. And I believe I take the Brainstorm. It gives my opponent the most options. Really don't like seeing... Oh, no. I take that back. I remember now. I actually take the Sinkhole. Yeah. The Stifle and the Shadow of Doubt interact with like my fetch lands, but this Sinkhole proactively gets me off of blue. Really don't want that to be happening right now, so yeah, I go ahead and take that Sinkhole. Second C. Now Shadow of Doubt is live. Luckily for me, there's just no pressure whatsoever, so I continue to sculpt. Seeing these 3 cards, actually not a bad setup. You know, now that I have Thassa's Oracle in hand, it's actually pretty good to have Cavern of Souls along with it. So at this point I was actually thinking, why don't I try to bait my opponent into resolving the Shadow of Doubt? You know, if I could get him to do that, that actually, in a way, just, it still aligns with the Thassa's Oracle plan, right? Like, the point of me casting Doomsday at this point is just to get my library to a certain size. I don't honestly care what the cards are because, well, I already have the pieces that I need. Not to mention, I would be able to put, like, looks like I have a Delta, Underground Sea, 2 Ponders, and a Duress in my graveyard right now. So, yeah, those are all great cards to put back into the library. So I go ahead and keep this Ponder. Yeah, this Lotus Petal gives me a 3rd black source that doesn't care about Stifle. It doesn't care about Stifle or Shadow of Doubt. And I think it gives me the opportunity to play around Daze as well. So very good Ponder over there. Just continue to dig. Yeah, I see the Cavern that I know about, and this Delta, which is huge. Yeah, this gives me yet another way to play around that Daze. Yeah, definitely don't want to be running that Cavern into a wasteland. So yeah, I go ahead and fetch first. I want to make sure that I just want to test the waters and see whether or not my opponent would stifle this land. If they do, that's actually not the worst because I do have Petal and Cavern of Souls. I do have, in other words, I do have a means of doing what I want to do. Cast the Lotus Petal to kind of play around that Daze here and put the Doomsday on the stack. Our opponent had a Drown in the lock, so I go ahead and Forceful there. At this point, I'm thinking all you got to do is put the Shadow of Doubt on the stack, and we're in a pretty good position here. We just want to hope that they don't cast Daze this turn. So yeah, I'm more than happy to let this resolve. But Moto glitches out here. I actually don't search my library, nor do I search my graveyard. A strange little glitch. And so yeah, it's kind of awkward. I just go ahead and play my land, and you know, I definitely went ahead and reported this to Wizards, but at the time of the match, neither of us catch this. Yeah, neither of us realized that like this was not supposed to happen. Like I had a suspicion. Like I was like, wait, Doomsday searches my graveyard as well. I should have been able to do that. Why wasn't I able to do that? So yeah, I kind of wanted to see how it would have played out had I just had like fetch lands and duress and a couple of cantrips in there. But yeah, we just kind of take it for what it is and go on to the next game. All right, last game of the league. Uh, Open with a pretty steady hand. I definitely like this Pyroblast. I just need to be able to get to a point where I could get it out in the open, and it counters plenty of threats. Threats being like Stifle and Shadow of Doubt. So definitely a card that I'm happy seeing in my opening hand. I don't really have any intentions on fetching. I just want to play around like a Wasteland or a Sinkhole. So I go ahead and lay the Tarn first. I didn't see a reason to cantrip on my first turn. Alright, drawing a second Force of Will. I figured this Ponder would be fair to fire off here, and I see a yet another Oracle and a Polluted Delta, so I'm pretty, between the Oracle and the land, I'm pretty happy seeing these two, so I go ahead and keep this, yeah. Drawing the land. Sinkhole. Now, I considered countering this spell here, but I felt like there were better things to protect. Between like the fetch lands that I have and like the Doomsday in hand, I figured it would be I would be better off just letting this happen. My opponent has traded basically an entire turn and a card just to do this. I think I just take the loss and move forward. At this point, I have the ability to play around Stifle. I could fetch with this one, and if they choose to Stifle, I could fetch with the other land, find like a red source and Pyroblast the Stifle. But it does resolve. Nonetheless, I don't want to get sloppy and like let the second one get hit by a Pyroblast, so I make sure to get the bad lands. I want to get this one first because A can cast Pyroblast, and B I really want to make sure I get to triple black in this matchup as soon as possible. So get the Badlands first and then the sea after. Go ahead and fire off a Brainstorm. And I see some pretty good cards. I didn't see myself casting the Pyroblasts this turn. I figured I could just check him with Thoughtseize and then try to resolve Doomsday on the subsequent turn. So I think the plan was to put the two blasts on top and then check him with Thoughtseize on this very turn. And our opponent dazes. Perhaps I should have waited an extra turn, but the fact that they're dazing, I mean, it's not the worst. It sets them back a land, which I think is good. I think this matchup very much depends on maintaining tempo. So I think that in that regard, this daze wasn't the worst. But at the same time, I really wanted to check what was up. I think due to the variety of spells that my opponent has to interact with me, yeah, I just really need the information. So I figured it was worth the Force of Will to cast, and no other responses. So I get to check what's in his hand. Seeing Drown in the Loch, Force of Will, Marsh Flats, Swamp, Underground Sea. I think the obvious pick here is the Drown in the Loch. So yeah, from here, I do have my own Force of Will to interact with theirs. And so, yeah, feeling pretty good about the situation. Go ahead and take the Drown in the Loch. My opponent top decks a Wasteland. Talk about timely. Really great card to have in this situation. So here I have no choice but to keep the Pyroblast I tucked on top. But I still have this bad land, so it's not the worst situation. Okay, so we're still playing against Force of Will X, 2 lands. I go ahead and fetch to get rid of the second Pyroblast. Didn't need it. Unfortunately, the land I draw is a Volcanic Island. Don't have access to triple black yet. But on this turn, we do draw a Force of Will, or excuse me, a Dark Ritual. And yeah, go ahead and try to push Doomsday through. The opponent has yet another Drawn on the Lock, which I meet with a Pyroblast. And Force of Will, pitching Force of Will, meaning my opponent has Marsh Flats left. And luckily for me, I had sighted in the second Thassa's Oracle, so I really didn't, I mean, I guess I had to, but I went ahead and exiled the Thassa's Oracle in my hand, just to make sure that this Doomsday resolves, so very nice that I had a second one. And from here, I just want to set up a situation where I could check their hand for a Stifle before setting up for a win. So I think my pile is some mix of like, I have, yeah, let's just see here what I select. Definitely Cavern of Souls, definitely Duress, Predict for sure, and the Oracle. So it looks like I have Cavern of Souls, Duress, Edge of Autumn, Predict, Thassa's Oracle. So the card that I select for for Predict fodder was Edge of Autumn, because yeah, if my opponent somehow had some sort of like land destruction spell, like I could just sacrifice that land to the Edge of Autumn. I guess to complete my thought, the dead card is there. I picked the dead card based off of you know, like I try to find a line where if the Predict is countered, you know, then I could have some sort of plan B, but otherwise it's just like a dead card for me to mill out. But it draws, plays the Marsh Flats that I know about, and so we're left with a potentially hard cast Force of Will. It is not the case, so I go ahead and bin the Edge of Autumn, drawing the Cavern of Souls. So basically what I lose to here is Stifle Snapcaster Mage. And yeah, my opponent very smartly holds that second card to keep me guessing, but my last card is a Duress. Go ahead and check him, and it is Stifle a Flooded Strand. So lucky me, it wasn't a double Stifle, and yeah, that was a pretty fun way to end the league. Yeah, really great game 3 of my round 5. All right, just a quick recap of the deck. I think overall, I was pretty happy with the build. I didn't see a single Limdol's Vault, so it was really hard to assess whether or not this was good. Like in theory, it just seems really awesome with Predict, and I guess my style of playing the deck is a little slower than some of the other pilots. Yeah, I just haven't wrapped my head around the quote turbo build, where you want to just use Personal Tutor to, you know, find Doomsday and cast it as soon as possible. Yeah, there's a possibility I might cut this for a third Predict. I have seen Cabal Ritual in some lists, and I'm kind of liking that idea. You know, it's a card that's really useful against decks that against Red Prison that pack both Chalice of the Void and Blood Moon. And yeah, Cabal Ritual plays very nicely around both of those, and at that point, like, it really doesn't, like your pile is yeah, it's pretty steady against prison decks, assuming that they don't have like a huge clock on you. So that's definitely something I would want to consider in the future. Whoops. Let's see. I have hesitations on the red build. Like, sometimes I feel like I could get away with just blue-black, but that would mean I would need like Force of Negation or something for the prison matchup. So I think I'll just go ahead and, you know, continue with this for now. I don't think like the Delver matchup was definitely rough, but I think the Baleful Strix were fairly helpful. Yeah, I definitely liked how they played in these past games. Yeah, I think honestly when it comes to the Delver matchup, I just need to be more careful. I just need to get my reps in and practice more. So yeah, if you're just watching and just like cringing, don't worry, so was I. There were plenty of things I could have done differently. But aside from that, yeah, I just want to continue to keep my eyes on this particular slot. But in general, yep, pretty happy with the deck. Yeah, until next time, thanks for watching.